Today is day 3 of our series, Effective Communication, a Marital Serenity 2. And on this series today, we shall be looking at some of the barriers to effective communication. Communication barriers arise as a result of our default setting as a child. A lot of people did not see or hear any positive modeling of communication when they were growing up. In fact, they were raised in an environment where effective communication was not the order of the day. And by default, they exhibit what they have learned even in their adulthood. Fortunately, this skill can be learned and corrected at any age. There are things that hinder couples from communicating effectively, and some of the things include: 1. Poor understanding of their functionality. Just imagine buying a new appliance. Take for instance a washing machine or a micro oven. The first thing you do is to reach for the instructional manual so that you understand how to use it. Marriage is not different from this illustration. However, what most people do is that they get married and they do not bother to search for the instructional manual of their spouse. This is what we call the user manual at the Institute of the Family Engineering and Development Center, where I got certified. To understand your spouse functionality, you need to read and understand their user manual. And this lack of understanding or study of the user manual have usually created problems, and it's a barrier to communication. Number 2 barrier to effective communication is interruption. There are lots of couples who actually engage in talking on daily basis, but there are too many interruptions during their conversation. In order to have effective communication, it is important to put aside or to avoid these interruptions so that it doesn't create problems in your marriage. It is necessary to eliminate them. It could be interruptions that are coming from the children or social media or television. It could be from any source. But the most important thing is that you should know when to put it aside. Hence, it is important to create time for those things as well as time to discuss with your spouse. Some minutes before bedtime or some hour, like an hour before bedtime, is usually a great idea for communication among couples in order to build intimacy. During this time, you need to put away all gadgets and all form of distraction to ensure that you are actively listening. Number 3 barrier to effective communication is lack of consideration of the emotional and physical state of your spouse. If your spouse is feeling hungry or worried or anxious, stressed, exhausted, or even sick, this definitely is not the right time for effective communication. There is a high tendency for the spouse to react out of impulse, or for the spouse to pay less attention when they are not in the right state. What you usually get is that they will listen less, they will understand less, and thus deliver less when in a despairing emotional and physical state. And that is why this is a barrier to effective communication. Hence, it is important to be absolutely comfortable when having a conversation with each other. Number 4 barrier to effective communication is understanding of your spouse's communication style. So communication style differ according to personality, and since personality and communication style differ, it is important for couples to understand the different way they communicate as individuals and as couples to avoid taking things personally. For instance, there are people who tend to be loud when they speak. Your understanding of this will make you understand that your partner is not yelling, but this is how your partner speaks. This is not to say that your style should limit you or that your style is for your partner to keep enduring. The essence of knowing your style of communication or your personality is to create awareness of your strength and the areas you need to improve on. It may not be easy to change the way you talk. However, if it is affecting your marriage, then you can intentionally, in fact, you need to intentionally improve on it. If your turn of speaking is the problem in the marriage, then you need to deliberately work on it to make it better. Number 4 barrier to communication is our beliefs. Yes, beliefs. Your belief and your perception of the word can hinder effective communication in marriage. For instance, if you believe that a man does not need to tell his wife how much he earns, that a wife does not need to communicate his income to his wife, then you are most likely going to have issues on topics bordering around finance. This perception needs to be changed for you to have an effective communication, because it tends to stand in the way of you and your partner. Open communication would be impacted if women believe that men are stupid, and if men believe that women are inferior. As a couple, it is good to talk about your beliefs regarding children, your religion, politics, your fantasy, your finance, and so on. It is important to talk about this. The fifth barrier to effective communication is expectation. Unrealistic expectation kills even in communication. There is a saying that when your expectation is not realistic, you are setting yourself up for failure and disappointment even before you get started. Your communication would not go well if you expect your partner to dismiss the idea or the feeling they have. Your communication will not go well. When your partner wants to talk about something and you feel it is irrelevant, that is an unrealistic expectation. People do not want to communicate when they know that their ideas will be constantly dismissed or taken for granted even before it is presented. And this in itself can kill communication in marriage. Expectations always direct us towards what we want to hear rather than what our partner is actually trying to say, what our partner is actually trying to communicate. And this makes us jump into assumption. Let what you expect from your partner be real. Let the conversation be real for a healthy communication. The 6th barrier to effective communication is physical safety. Yes, physical safety. If your partner feels unsafe and fearful, then no communication is likely to take place effectively under such situation. There will be lack of honesty even if the communication takes place. There will be lack of honesty in sharing the information and the ideas, and a lot of emotions would be suppressed and hidden. Hence, effective communication cannot happen. Domestic violence is one of the issues that is prevailing in the world now, and it creates an emotion of fear in one spouse. This can really be an unsafe place to openly communicate, because you tend to only say what you feel your spouse wants to hear, or what would not anger your spouse, because you don't want him or her to get violent, especially when you know that the person is likely to react violently. There is basically no communication in such marriage, and the partner tend to feel depressed and detached with time. it is very, very paramount in marriage to evaluate these barriers. And for today, we'll be stopping here, but we have 2 more barriers to look at. We shall be visiting those barriers tomorrow and the levels of communication in marriage. Until I come your way again, I remain your Serenity Coach, Chinere Nwobi. Bye. Good day. And we're here again on our series, The Effective Communication of Serenity, a Marital Serenity Tool. Today being the day 5 of this series, we shall be looking at the final level of communication in marriage and the effect of ineffective or poor communication in marriage. The final level of communication in marriage is the intimate communication. This is exactly just the way it sounds. It is that level of communication that indicates an expression of love and affection. You may want to whisper words like, "I love you so much," to your spouse, because this is the deepest level of communication between couples, as it contains statements and actions that no one else should express to your spouse. This is the kind of communication that binds hearts together and builds the kind of closeness that keeps a marriage strong and lasting. The level 6 is a proof of intimacy and comfort in your marriage. It can be very useful to diffuse any form of conflict that is brewing amongst you as a couple. And as a couple on this level, you would like to de-escalate any form of tension on the horizon. You become observant of your spouse's emotion, and you could choose to use words like, "I can tell you're upset. How would you like me to help?" Or "What would you have me do to help? What's going on?" This is a very powerful and a great way to diffuse any conflict when things get heated. All 6 levels of communication are important, and what makes a healthy marriage is contained in all 6 levels. You should be able to use all 6 to grow a healthy and a thriving marriage. Sadly, a lot of couples start off using the 6 levels of communication, but along the line, familiarity syndromes or challenges involved in marriage, such as conflicts or parenting, take over them, that they find themselves only communicating at the basic level, using maybe level 1 or level 2. They just talk about their kids and how to pay bills, and next, communication completely dies off and never goes deeper, especially in the face of conflict. But this is when effective communication is most needed. You can think of these 6 levels of communication as a ladder to accessing serenity, happier, emotional, and healthy life as a couple. Any couple who has remained at level 1 or level 2 of this communication needs to learn how to spend time together so they can build deeper connection with each other. Yet there are couples who fall into the temptation or the trap of using level 1 and 2 during a hectic period. These couples become like ships passing in deep darkness of the night with no light to illuminate their path. It is then a good idea to learn how to insert useful phrase in the face of conflict. You could say, "What do you think?" This helps you to solicit response from your partner. Or you could say, "Do you feel or do you think this sounds reasonable?" Rather than just making a conclusion and trying to shove it down your partner. When using level 3 and 4 of this communication, you need to solicit your partner's response so that it doesn't appear as if you are lecturing your partner. This phrase hands conversation over to your partner, enabling them to connect better and to resolve conflict. Whenever you do so as a couple, you are making effort to connect better. And as a couple, whatever you do, ensure that you use level 5 and level 6 of communication at least 30 minutes or even 15 minutes in a day for a rock solid marital relationship. So before we proceed for today, I'd like to give you a quick task. Take a look at the way you and your spouse are communicating and evaluate, are you at level 3? What level really are you communicating at? Deeper types of communication exist and we have seen it. Are you truly connecting? Are you sharing your innermost thoughts and expression? Are you communicating intimately and affectionately? This is important for you to evaluate as we proceed on this series so that you will be able to make connections and get results from this series. So we move on to the effect of lack of effective communication in marriage, or you could say effect of ineffective communication in marriage. Being married for long makes some couple normalize the lack of effective communication in marriage because they believe it is something that is common. So they normalize ineffectiveness in their communication. You get carried away by the routine of your daily tasks and you just go into action mode with everything you do, as a couple, without deeming it fit to communicate or to discuss that. The result of this is that the once enjoyable marriage, the once enjoyable conversation you have will now turn into a chit chat in a hallway, just a passing conversation. And that is when you find yourself at level 1. It makes you take effective communication for granted, and over time communication seems to go away between you and your partner. You may go an entire day without talking to each other or communicating about anything. You may probably think that this is normal, but this is very unhealthy for your marriage. It is true that the responsibility of marriage can make communication shift over a period of time. And this is why you need to be intentional about the way you communicate. The reality is that when you are not communicating effectively, it creates a huge gap, which brings about bigger problems in your marriage. Marriage without effective communication is not sustainable. There are serious problems that can arise as a result of this, one of which includes disregard of support from your spouse. This might not sound like a big problem, but it is a big problem. When you're married, you should be able to first seek support from your partner. That's not to say that you cannot seek for help elsewhere, but you should first at least seek for that support from your partner to be able to even find out if your partner can support you before searching for support outside. You cannot stay with your partner and exist as roommates. Instead, as a couple, you need to fill the void for each other, because when you don't do this through effective communication, you look for means outside on how to fill this void. Couples who do not talk to one another are more like roommates. Drawing away from your spouse, either in thoughts or in your action, can be very harmful and damaging to your marriage. The lack of respect and love you experience can be as a result of ineffective communication, and this gives rise to insecurity, which might cause one spouse to seek someone outside the marriage to fill this void that is lacking in the marriage. When this is lacking as a result of conflict, then you might turn to someone else out of necessity, and this might not end well. How do you know if you are not being supportive as a spouse? How do you know when you are not being supportive to your partner as a spouse. Some of the inclinations that suggest that you are not being supportive is when you tend to dismiss the concerns of your partner. Number 2 is that when you don't offer to help when decisions are being made. Number 3, when you often criticize your partner even when it is unnecessary. Number 4, when you don't motivate them to achieve their dreams and aspirations, then you are likely to be that partner that is unsupportive. So you need to ask yourself, are you living with your spouse as a partner, or are you just existing as a roommate? Until I come your way again tomorrow, I remain your Serenity Coach, Chineye Mobi. Bye. Good day. You're welcome yet again to a new day in our series, Effective Communication, a Marital Serenity 2. In the previous day, being the day 5, we started to look at the effect of ineffective communication in marriage. And we should go on today to evaluate some more effects of ineffective communication in marriage. The second problem that ineffective communication or lack of it causes in marriage is that the people in this marriage, the two people in this marriage, begin to feel like strangers. If you do not communicate and keep communication going in marriage, you feel like you're losing each other. And if this continues over a period of time, intimacy in the marriage relationship begins to suffer and the connection weakens. You find it hard to get a common ground on any issue. If your partner cannot communicate with you, it's usually a strange feeling that can pose a huge challenge. Remember, your partner cannot decipher your emotion. You need to communicate it. You may find out that you argue more and more and you spend less time together in a place where there is no communication. The other thing, or the third thing ineffective communication can do to married couples is that it robs them of their connection. It takes away connection from them, and where there is no communication in marriage, problem begins to arise and raises its ugly head between this couple due to the lack of communication in the relationship. You may lose connection, love, passion, and that spark you had for each other when you first met. The fourth thing ineffective communication can do in marriage is that it leads to money problems. Yes, financial problems. Money can be a very touchy subject for most people, and this topic might appear a little awkward to bring up in marriage, especially if you're in the process of trying to merge your finance, or if you're that partner that have acquired huge debt somewhere and have not told your spouse about it. You find it strange to engage in a conversation of finance, but it is always advisable to do it, whether you're sharing a joint bank account or you're keeping a separate account. It is very important to talk about your finance. Couples who don't talk about their finance always tend to overspend, and they feel held back by not being the breadwinner. And in the end, they delve into deeper and deeper debt, even more than when they were single. It is important for couples to discuss budgeting and to keep an open door of discussion about issues of their debt and expenses. This helps them guide against unnecessary spending that depletes their family finance. The fifth thing that ineffective communication causes in marriage is that it makes the people in this marriage feel emotionally distant. The less you communicate with your spouse, the more emotionally distant you would become. Talking is one way to bridge this gap. When there is a lack of communication in the marriage, love also starts to fade as a result of the gap. When couples in marriage grow distant apart, they are less inclined to have sex, to have date night, and to fix any problem that arises in their marriage. The sixth reason, the sixth cause of ineffective communication in marriage is that it leads to wrong assumptions. When couples are not open with one another, it becomes very easy for them to start to make assumptions. And we know assumption is very wrong and dangerous. The best thing to do is to find facts and clarify issues. And this fact finding and clarification of issues can only take place with effective communication. If you are not letting your spouse, for example, know that you'll be running late for the day, or that you'll be going off to see a friend from work instead of coming back home, or possibly you could be in a place and refuse to divulge your location to your spouse, this can lead to a lot of wrong assumptions, which is very, very detrimental to your marriage. The seventh effect of ineffective communication in marriage is that your sex life begins to suffer. There are many sexual problems that arises as a result of lack of communication in marriage. For example, a lack of orgasm may result to frustration, bitterness, anger between married partners, and it can cause hostility and disappointment if not communicated. Likewise, a person may want sex but feels incapable of making the first move, and this person does not communicate it. This can be very frustrating for both spouses. Couples need to have an open and a honest conversation about their intimate life, their preference, their experience, their choice of frequency, their fantasies, their needs, their turn-on, in order to create an equally satisfactory sexual relationship. Poor communication in sex matters can cause a spouse to be unfaithful in marriage. It can make you feel tempted to cheat. The eighth effect of ineffective communication in marriage is that the couples are unable to make compromise for each other. Remember, you cannot be always right, as much as you might wish otherwise, but you can never be always right. Marriage requires a balance. A great marriage relationship is built on trust, respect, and compromise. When there is no communication in that relationship, couples have no room to compromise. The ninth effect of ineffective communication in marriage is that the marriage can become stagnant. Change and growth there are two things that are constant with human beings, because people must change and people must grow. This fact makes it very important for couples to learn to embrace change and to grow together. When there is lack of communication or the ineffective communication in marriage, then this marriage tends to become stagnant because the couples no longer understand each other. Never stop learning about your partner. And you need to learn to evolve together in order to develop trust, matured relationship that both of you can understand, such that you understand each other's wants and needs clearly. These are the 9 things that I want to apply on the effect of ineffective communication. It boils down for you to evaluate: is lack of communication depleting your marital serenity? It's a question you need to look at. Haven't evaluated the 9 things in this series that are results of ineffective communication. Do you find yourself in any category? What are you choosing to do today? That is the question, and a take home for you to ponder after listening to this series. But we go on to evaluate the benefits of effective communication, because yes, there are benefits to communicating right, and one of these benefits includes that it promotes instruction. When you communicate in a kind and a cautious manner that resonates with the way your partner receives information and chooses to be spoken to, it not only sends the message but it always allows the heart to receive the information you are offering. Number 2 benefit of effective communication is that it brings healing. Nice words are soothing like a balm to the soul. So effective communication brings healing in marriage. Number 3 benefit of effective communication is that it nourishes this marriage. One good communication radiates peace in the home. It has a way of multiplying everything around the home. The long-term payoff of effective communication is serenity as well as happiness in your marriage. The 4th benefit of effective communication is that communication in marriage is important because it is a vehicle through which all important parts of the marriage are performed. And lastly, but not the least, is that it opens the people in marriage, the husband and wife, it opens them to each other, enabling them to see through each other. When communicating effectively and honestly in your marriage, then you have a great chance at living peacefully, happily, and healthy. So the choice is for you to make today. What really do you want out of your marriage? When you are able to answer that, then you are more able to embrace the idea of effective communication. Until I come your way again tomorrow, I remain your Serenity Coach, Shine Mobi. Bye.